3.
Hello, this is Professor Melissa Aaron, and I'd like to welcome you again to Shakespeare Online. Today we're going to start the comedy Twelfth Night. Twelfth Night, the very title of the play, refers to a holiday. You probably know the song, "On the 12th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me," and all of that. Christmas in Elizabethan times was really a season, not so much an individual holiday, and the 12th day of Christmas was celebrated by crowning a king. By lords of misrule, it was usually given over to a temporary suspension of order for the day. By usually celebrating with cakes and ale, as Sir Toby mentions, and also it began the beginning of the carnival season, which would go straight up to what we would think of as Mardi Gras. Their term for it was Shrove Tuesday, the day that immediately precedes Ash Wednesday. So this is a holiday play. It's a play that emphasizes a temporary suspension of order and disorder. And it's also a winter play, and that gives a certain tone to it. It's always helpful in comedy to keep a kind of scorecard of the characters in the households. Now, this is a leftover from Roman comedy, where a lot of the action took place in the street in front of one or two houses. And so sometimes what you can do is divide the characters into two different households, as in this play, and also from, side to side, and then from top to bottom, belonging to different plots. So there's the sort of lover's plot, and then there's a sort of clown's plot. And these people tend to cluster together. So you don't have to keep track of a zillion different characters. You have to keep track of just what group of people they belong to. In this play, the two households are Orsino's household and Olivia's household. And in Orsino's household, there is Orsino, his servants, and Viola, for a time, in any case. In Olivia's household, there is Olivia, there is her lady-in-waiting Maria, there is her drunken uncle Sir Toby, and Sir Andrew Eggachik, and then there is the clown Festa, who floats back and forth between both households. Being a fool, he sort of is outside of society. And of course, also in Olivia's household is the steward Malvolio. So we have those two different households. In terms of different plot, we have Orsino, Olivia, Sebastian, and Viola belonging to the high plot, or the lover's plot, and the clown plot is pretty much Maria, Sir Toby, Sir Andrew, and Malvolio. So if you can keep those divided into what amounts to like a little pie with 4 quarters, that really helps a lot. Now, I mentioned that this is a leftover from Roman comedy. This play does have a lot in common with Roman comedy. It's based on a play, roughly based on a play called The Brothers Menaechmi by Plautus, which has a set of twins in it and a lot of confusion. There's another Shakespeare play which is entirely based on the Menaechmi, and that is The Comedy of Errors. There are certain stock characters from Roman comedy who appear in this play. There are lovers' plots, there are characters that are clowns, there are clever servants, there are bold and captains who are pretty much all mouth and no action. And then those characters carried over into the Italian comedy, Commedia dell'arte. This play is more closely related to an Italian romance called Apollonius and Scylla, in which there is a twin, a set of twins, and one of them is a girl who has to disguise herself as a boy temporarily. So that is the source of this play. Well, one of the things you're going to discover is that a lot of people are in love in this play. And in the Renaissance, you do not fall in love with your heart, you fall in love with your liver. That sounds very strange. I mean, you can imagine how well Valentine's Day would do if you sent little liver-shaped cards to each other. But the liver is the seat of passion. There are various different humors that your body is constructed of. The Renaissance attitude of medicine is that there are 4 humors. They're roughly fluids: that belong to your body. And the four humors are choleric, sanguine, melancholic, and phlegmatic. Each of these corresponds to a fluid. Choleric corresponds to gall or yellow bile. It's emitted by the gallbladder, and it makes you hot and peppery tempered. Sanguine corresponds to blood, and it tends to make you warm and fuzzy and extremely fond of eating and drinking. Melancholy, which comes from black bile from the liver, is something that makes you, if it's good, it makes you poetic. It can be brought on by too much reading or too much being in love, or just be a personality trait. When we see Hamlet, we'll see a character who has taken melancholy to an extreme. And then there's the phlegmatic temperament, and that is based on the fluid phlegm, which is our polite word for it. And mostly Shakespeare doesn't write a lot of characters who are phlegmatic characters because they're pretty dull. Phlegmatic characters don't do much of anything. So one of the characters in this play suffers intensely from love melancholy. That is the Duke Orsino, and part of this play involves his cure. Major themes to look for in this play: fate and chance. A lot of the characters refer again and again to chance, to time, the workings out of time. And another major theme is the sea. Romances and comedies very often begin with a shipwreck. Shipwrecks are very convenient for scrambling a lot of characters who wouldn't ordinarily come into contact with each other, and then they do get a chance to come into contact with each other. Again, it's a suspension of the ordinary order of things. And in this particular case, the metaphor of the sea is something that's hungry, something that's devouring, and also that some of you may be surfers, and you know that when you get caught by a large wave, the most sensible thing to do is to roll with it, to go with the flow. And in this particular play, the characters that go with the flow the most are the ones who do the best. The most rigid characters are the ones who have the hardest time. One of the most fluid characters being Viola, and one of the most rigid characters being Malvolio, the steward. So just keep an eye out for those different themes: fate and chance, time, going with the flow, and the sea, and also melancholy. There's a lot of music in this play. You aren't going to get to hear me sing very much of it, but we've got little clips of it on the web page for you. Now, this play has a very different opening from Richard III. Remember, we opened up Richard III with Richard just confiding in us, and that being a very direct, very theatrical opening. This play begins with music. It begins with the Duke listening to the music and his state of love melancholy, which makes him changeable, and also that he is obsessed. He has got a thing for the Countess Olivia. He's in love with Olivia, and Olivia is not interested in him. And he has not really reached the point where he's willing to accept that. He interprets everything the way he wants to. So as the music begins, you hear Orsino begin with this very intensely poetic opening. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. That strain again, it had a dying fall. Oh, it came o'er my ear like a sweet strain that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Enough, no more. 'Tis not so sweet now as it was before. So he's only interested in music for a moment, and then he wants to cut it off. And he's sort of proud of this, that this is his mood. One of his servants tries to distract him by suggesting that he go hunt. And when he says, "What shall we hunt?" he says, "The hart." And the hart is a deer. But, of course, what Orsino then makes a horrible pun on heart and heart. "Why, so I do, the noblest that I have. Oh, when mine eyes did see Olivia first, methought she purged the air of pestilence. That instant was I turned into a hart, and my desires like fell and cruel hounds e'er since pursue me. That's a reference to the myth of Actaeon. Actaeon was a hunter who made the mistake of spying on the goddess Diana when she was bathing. She had him turned into a stag, and his hounds followed him and ripped him apart. That became a metaphor for being ripped apart by your own desires. But you'll also notice that Orsino cannot not think of Olivia, and you always want to sympathize with his servants who have been listening to this for heaven alone knows how long. Valentine comes in, and he's given the message that Olivia is not interested, or rather that she intends to be busy for the next 7 years. Her brother has just died, and she's going to be in mourning for that long. The element itself till 7 years' heat shall not behold her face at ample view, but like a cloistress she will veiled walk, and water once a day her chamber round with eye-offending brine. All this to season a brother's dead love, which she would keep fresh and lasting in her sad remembrance. Now, normally a person would give up at that point. I intend to be busy for the next 7 years, and it would be, well, what's your sister doing then? Orsino, on the other hand, just interprets this to mean what he wants. Oh, she that hath a heart of that fine frame, to pay this debt of love but to a brother. How will she love when the rich golden shaft hath killed the flock of all affections else? In other words, boy, if she can love a brother this much, just imagine how much she'll love me. So he still continues to send her various different flowers and candygrams. He's not accepting her no as a no. This is a state of stalemate. Where Orsino will not stop pursuing and Olivia will not respond. And into this stalemate comes something that will break it, and that is Viola. Viola begins. She is the twin sister of Sebastian. They look entirely alike. That is naturally, of course, almost impossible because they would be fraternal twins, and the idea of fraternal twins that look exactly alike is very unlikely, but we have to have it for this play. They have been shipwrecked, they have been separated, and she has been washed up on the seashore of Illyria. Now, Illyria is pretty much where the former Yugoslavia was. The thing is that it doesn't really matter. This particular story is set almost in a never-never land. There's very little about it that is specifically Illyrian. Viola begins not even knowing what country this is. And all she has is the hope that perchance, her brother is not dead. What country, friends, is this? This is Illyria, lady. And what should I do in Illyria? My brother, he is in Elysium. Perchance he is not drowned. What think you, sailor? It is perchance that you yourself were saved. Oh, my poor brother. And so perchance may he be. True, madam, and to comfort you with chance, assure yourself after our ship did split, when you and those poor numbers saved with you hung on our driving boat, I saw your brother, most provident in peril, bind himself courage and hope, both teaching him the practice, to a strong mast that lived upon the sea, where like Arion on the dolphin's back I saw him hold acquaintance with the waves so long as I could see. And so she says, perchance he is not drowned, maybe he is not drowned. And the captain says, well, you were saved by chance, and so perchance he might be saved. And to comfort her with chance, that the last time the captain saw Sebastian, he seemed to be alive. So that is a hope. At this point, Viola is, interestingly enough, in the exact same social position as Olivia, this young woman. They're both two young women who are without fathers, without brothers, in a culture that depends very much upon women being dependent upon men. And at least she has been completely stripped of money, of social standing, of any kind of acquaintance, and she has been left pretty much bereft on the seashore. Two women who have both lost their brothers, very different responses. What is she going to do now? She needs to do something. And at first she thinks maybe what would be a good idea would be to go to Olivia's court. Well, she also seems to remember that the guy who runs this country is Orsino. And as she says, Orsino, I have heard my father name him. He was a bachelor then. Now, it seems almost as though she's sort of interested in Orsino before she even meets him. She tries to go to Olivia's court, and she's informed by the captain there's no point in going to Olivia's court. She's not letting anybody in. And so she says, I will disguise myself as a boy, and I will go and serve the Duke. Now, that seems like a very strange maneuver. Later we find out that she doesn't just put on male clothes. What she does is disguise herself to look exactly like her brother. So she, in essence, becomes her brother. She stands in for her brother. She becomes like a walking tomb. And when you read this play and you see all of the stage directions and the speech prefixes, you can see Vio, 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 so we know it's Viola. Think in terms of what this sounds like on stage. I want you to keep an ear out for when Viola is first called by her true name, when she gets to have her own identity back. It'll be a while. Now, remember I told you that there's usually two different sets of plots, and the way Shakespeare likes to set these up is he likes to sandwich scenes back and forth. So first we're with the lovers, then we're with the clowns. First we're at Orsino's, then we're at Olivia's. And this kind of meanwhile back at the ranch kind of structure, again, makes it easier to keep track of. Here we're introduced to the comic characters. The comic characters being Sir Toby. That is Olivia's uncle. She is not really able to control him. Sir Toby is somebody who would like it to be Christmas all year round, and Christmas at that time was celebrated with a lot of drinking. Maria's concern, her lady-in-waiting's concern, is that Sir Toby will eventually get thrown out of the house for drinking and carousing too much. And also Sir Toby has invited another person in, a suitor to Olivia, whom Olivia really can't get rid of. And his name is Sir Andrew Aguecheek. He's a complete idiot. Now, their style of presentation, Sir Toby, with a name like Sir Toby Belch, you can figure what he's like. He's very overweight. He's got very ruddy red cheeks. He's constantly belching, as a matter of fact. He's drinking. And then Sir Andrew Aguecheek is long and skinny, and there's a reference to his hair hanging like flax on a distaff. In other words, he's got long, lank, blonde hair. So we have this Laurel and Hardy effect. They're sort of very different looking. Maria manages to make fun of Sir Andrew. She sort of tricks him into putting his hand down her chest. Yes, this is Shakespeare. I didn't promise you that it was tasteful. And Sir Andrew doesn't know what to do. And then this becomes, she manages to make fun of him. Sir Andrew and Sir Toby start talking about dancing. And the dancing is, there's all these specific references to particular Renaissance dances. What is thy excellence in a galliard, knight? Faith, I can cut a caper, and I can cut the mutton to it. Well, capers and mutton, it's a bad joke. And I think I have the back trick, simply as strong as any man in Illyria. And the back trick is a step in which you actually kick your own rear end with your heel. It figures that Sir Andrew, being an idiot, he would be particularly good at kicking himself in the butt. Sir Toby tells him, well, this is a major accomplishment of yours to be able to dance. You should dance all the time. Wherefore are these things hid? Wherefore have these gifts a curtain before them? Are they like to take dust, like Mistress Mall's picture? Why dost thou not go to church in a galliard and come home in a coranto? My very walk should be a jig. I would not so much as make water as in a syncopace. What dost thou mean? Is it a world to hide virtues in? I did think by the excellent constitution of thy leg it was formed under the star of a galliard. Aye, 'tis strong, and it does indifferent well in a dun-coloured stock. Shall we set about some revels? What shall we do else? Were we not born under Taurus? Taurus, that's sides and heart. No, sir, it is legs and thighs. Let me see thee caper. Ha! Higher! Now, remember I told you everything, including your body parts, are assigned to a different zodiacal sign. And Sir Andrew says Taurus, that's sides and heart. And Sir Toby says, no, it's legs and thighs. And they're both wrong, and that's part of the joke there. It doesn't take very long for Viola in Act 1, Scene 4 to have been admitted to Orsino's confidence. In fact, there's something extraordinary about the way that he has taken to this young man. And he says to him that he has unclasped to him the book even of my secret soul. And so because they have become so close, he thinks this would be an admirable person to send to Olivia to convince her that really she ought to love Orsino. And Viola is not so keen on this. She tries to put him off. Sure, my noble lord, if she be so abandoned to her sorrow as it is spoke, she never will admit me. Be clamorous and leap all civil bounds rather than make unprofited return. Say I do speak with her, my lord, what then? Oh, then unfold the passion of my love. Surprise her with discourse of my dear faith. It shall become thee well and attack my woes. She will attend it better in thy youth than in annuncios of more grave aspect. I think not so, my lord. Dear lad, believe it. For they shall yet belie thy happy years that say thou art a man. Diana's lip is not more smooth and rubious. Thy small pipe is as the maiden's organ, shrill of sound, and all is semblative a woman's part. I know thy constellation is right apt for this affair. So what Orsino is saying is, gee, you kind of, your lips are kind of like a woman's, and your voice is kind of like a woman's, and you kind of look like a girl. And you wonder whether or not he's sort of subconsciously thinking this probably is a woman, whether he has somehow gotten some kind of a clue, whether he subconsciously thinks about that. Viola says that she will do her best to woo his lady, and in fact we see that she tries very hard, but then she adds, yet a barful strife, whoe'er I woo, myself would be his wife. And so we have an unpleasant little love triangle set up where Viola loves Orsino, who loves Olivia, and then, of course, in a few minutes we're going to see that Olivia is going to fall in love with Viola, thinking that Viola is a man. So that's going to be a bit of a mess, and we're going to have to get that straightened out. With Scene 5, we have the beginning of the entrance of the clown, Festa. Festa is a fool. And there were two types of fools. There were what were called natural fools. That would be a person who was in some way developmentally disabled. And the Renaissance not necessarily being a very enlightened time, it was considered entertaining to keep somebody around like that, basically just to watch what they did and said and to take amusement from that. That could be anything from a charitable thing to do to a rather nasty thing to do. And then there were artificial fools, and that is what Festa is, somebody who pretends to be a fool, who tells jokes, who sings songs, something like a jester. But natural fools and artificial fools alike had license. That doesn't mean that they went out to the DMV and they got themselves a fool's license. What that means is that they had liberty to say what they wanted to anybody they wanted to. And wise men took this as a good thing to have around, that when nobody else would speak the truth to them, the fool considered that he had liberty to do so. And that is what he proceeds to do to Olivia. When Olivia comes in, she threatens to fire him because he has been away. And so he has to give her a sample of his wit. And he says that he can prove that she is a fool. Now, this woman is entirely dressed in black. She's extremely sober. She's coming in with her extremely sober steward, Malvolio. A steward is something like a chief servant and something like an estate manager, something in between, but he's definitely a servant. And so Festa sets about proving that Olivia is a fool. "Good Madonna, give me leave to prove you a fool." "Can you do it?" "Dexterously, good Madonna." "Make your proof. I must catechize you for it." Madonna. "Good my mouse of virtue, answer me." "Well, sir, for want of other idleness, I'll bide your proof." "Good Madonna, why mourn'st thou?" "Good fool, for my brother's death." "I think his soul is in hell, Madonna. I know his soul is in heaven, fool." "The more fool, Madonna, to mourn for your brother's soul being in heaven." "Take away the fool, gentlemen." In other words, why are you mourning like this? Your brother is in paradise. You have no reason to mourn. He's the only one who's had the guts to say that to her. And she thinks this is maybe a good thing. She turns to Malvolio and says, "What do you think?" And we see that Malvolio belongs to the ranks of the severely humor impaired. "Infirmity that decays the wise doth ever make the better fool. I marvel your ladyship takes delight in such a barren rascal. I saw him put down the other day with an ordinary fool that has no more brain than a stone. Look you now, he's out of his guard already. Unless you laugh and minister occasion to him, he's gagged. I protest I take these wise men that crow so at these set kind of fools no better than the fools' zanies." And he then basically suggests this would mean that Festa would lose his job. And Festa remembers this. He doesn't take immediate revenge, but one of the things that time does, in addition to working out all kinds of problems, as we see Festa say at the end of the play, the whirligig of time brings in his revenges. And so Festa will remember this nasty thing that Malvolio does. We get a report that Viola is at the gate, or rather the name she's going under, her name to disguise Cesario. And Malvolio comes in saying that he's tried all the usual butler's lies. She's not in, she's not at home, she's asleep, she's sick, and Viola will not take no for an answer. Now, before we saw that nobody else got this far. Valentine was sent back without even having a chance to speak to Olivia. There's something about this young man who will not go home that intrigues Olivia enough to have him let in. But they decide to play a joke on him, which is that they throw the veils over their faces, and when Viola comes in, she has to give a speech about how beautiful Olivia is to a blank veil, not knowing which one of these blank veils is Olivia. "The honorable lady of the house, which is she? Speak to me, I shall answer for her your will. Most radiant, exquisite, and unmatchable beauty. I pray you tell me if this be the lady of the house, for I never saw her. I would be loath to cast away my speech, for besides that it is excellently well penned, I have taken great pains to con it." In other words, I've memorized this speech and I don't want to waste it. And Olivia says, "Forget it. I'm not interested in hearing the speech. It's likely to be fake. I'm not interested in any of that stuff." Viola pushes. Olivia says that she heard that she was saucy at my gates, and allowed your approach rather to wonder at you than to hear you. If you be not mad, be gone. If you have reason, be brief. 'Tis not that time of the moon with me to make one, and so skipping a dialogue. In other words, it's that time of the month. Olivia is saying, speed it up, I have PMS, I'm not interested in your speech. Viola actually convinces Olivia not just to listen to her, but to have everyone else sent away. Again, this is much further than anyone has ever gone. You'll also notice that Orsino has sent messengers. He has not come wooing for himself. That may have harmed him. Viola actually asks to see Olivia's face, and the question is, why does she do that? It could be that she's sizing up the competition. She wants to see what it is that's attracted Orsino so much. "Good madam, let me see your face. Have you any commission from your lord to negotiate with my face? You are now out of your text, but we will draw the curtain and show you the picture." Look you, sir, such a one I was this present. Is it not well done? Excellently done, if God did all. 'Tis in grain, sir, 'twill endure wind and weather. And so the implication that she's painted herself up to look that good. And Viola then moves from, wow, you really are beautiful, and then into another standard sonneteers thing, something that Shakespeare himself uses in his sonnets, saying that you can't, if you're so beautiful, you can't refuse to reproduce yourself. That was just cruel, so you should get married and have children. Olivia says, I'm not going to leave the world no copy of my beauty. I'll put it in my will. She says, item 2 lips indifferent red, item 2 gray eyes with lids to them, item 1 neck, 1 chin, and so forth. Were you sent hither to praise me? I see you what you are. You are too proud. But if you are the devil, you are fair. My lord and master loves you. Oh, such love could be but recompense, though you were crowned the nonpareil of beauty. How does he love me? With adorations, with fertile tears, with groans that thunder love, with sighs of fire. Get you to your lord. Your lord does know my mind. I cannot love him, yet I suppose him virtuous, know him noble, of great estate, of fresh and stainless youth, and voices well divulged, free, learned, and valiant, and in the dimension and the shape of nature a gracious person, but yet I cannot love him. He might have took his answer long ago. And this is important to remember, which is that she says, there's nothing wrong with Orsino. I just don't love him. And that it's impossible to force love. This is a lesson that many of the characters in this play have to learn, that it's impossible to force love. Viola insists that if she were as much in love with Olivia as Orsino was, that she would not understand this denial. And Olivia wants to know, what would you do? Make me a willow cabin at your gate and call upon my soul within the house. Write loyal cantons of contemned love and sing them loud, even in the dead of night. Halloo your name to the reverberate hills and make the babbling gossip of the air cry out, Olivia! Oh, you should not rest between the elements of air and earth, but you should pity me. You might do much. What is your parentage? Why does she ask, what is your parentage? It's like asking, interesting. Do you own or do you rent? She's, in other words, trying to find out something more about Viola / Cesario. In other words, this has interested her. Now, there's been a genuine note of passion in Viola's pleading, and that's all displaced from her love for Orsino. She would like to spit this out to Orsino, but she can't. She winds up using it for Olivia, and Olivia mistakes it as being meant for her. Olivia insists, I can't love him, don't come back, unless you come to me again tomorrow to tell me how he takes it. Fare you well, I thank you for your pains, spend this for me. And she gives Viola a tip. That is a test. If Viola takes the tip, she's not a gentleman, and therefore wouldn't be an appropriate mate for Olivia, but Viola refuses to take it. In fact, she's quite angry. I am no feed post, lady, keep your purse. My master, not myself, lacks recompense. Love make his heart of flint that you shall love, and let your fervour, like my master's, be placed in contempt. Farewell, fair cruelty. Now that's a curse. I hope you love someone as much as Orsino loves you, and I hope that the person that you fall in love with is as incapable of returning your love as you are incapable of returning Orsino's love. And of course, as we've seen in Richard III, curses always come true. This curse has already come true. And Olivia almost immediately starts, as the second that Viola's out the door, replaying the conversation in her head. What is your parentage? Above my fortunes, yet my state is well. I am a gentleman. I'll be sworn thou art. Thy tongue, thy face, thy limbs, actions, and gait do give thee fivefold blazon. Not too fast. Soft, soft. Unless the master were the man. How now? Even so quickly may one catch the plague? Can you fall in love in such a hurry? Well, yeah, I guess you can. And she sends Malvolio off with a ring and the injunction to give it to Viola. And she says herself, I know not what, and fear to find mine eye too great a flatterer for my mind. Fate, show thy force. Ourselves we do not owe. What is to be must be, and be this so. So she sounds like she's willing to let things be, but in fact she wants to force things to be the way she wants. Antonio, the next time we see somebody come in that looks like Viola, it is not Viola. It is her brother Sebastian, who has been saved by a captain named Antonio. Antonio seems to be so fond of Sebastian that he's willing to follow him into danger. And one of the questions is this friendship, or is Antonio actually really sort of in love with Sebastian? And if that's the case, does Sebastian even really realize that that's what's going on? When Malvolio catches up with Viola, he gives her the ring, and Viola realizes, in fact, wait a minute, I didn't leave a ring with Olivia. What's going on? And realizes in some horror that she has convinced Olivia to love her, and that this is going to be a mess. She made good view of me, indeed, so much that methought her eyes had lost her tongue, for she did speak in starts distractedly. She loves me, sure. The cunning of her passion finds itself in this cunning messenger. None of my lord's ring? Why, he sent her none. I am the man. If it be so, as 'tis, poor lady, she were better love a dream. And of course this becomes a mess, as she says, my master loves her dearly, and she, mistaken, seems to dote on me, and of course she is in love with Orsino herself. What will become of this? As I am man, my state is desperate for my master's love. As I am woman, now alack the day, what thriftless sighs must poor Olivia breathe? O time, thou must untangle this, not I. It is too hard a knot for me to untie. So Viola realizes that this is an impossible situation, and how is it going to work out? Well, she doesn't know. She'll leave it up to time. I mentioned that she's a very flexible character. That is how she handles it. Now, we have Sir Toby and Sir Andrew getting drunk and having a heck of a good time and coming in with Festa, and they start singing various different love songs and having a great time. Maria comes in to warn them to keep it down because Olivia doesn't appreciate this, and then Malvolio tries to shut them up. Malvolio, as I said, is very humor impaired. He's referred to as a Puritan. They were well known for not enjoying different kinds of entertainment, including theater, and they tell him that they want to continue partying. So there's a power struggle going on here. My masters, are you mad, or what are you? Have you no wit, manners, nor honesty, but to gabble like tinkers at this time of night? Do you make an ale-house of my lady's house, that you squeak out your cudgeller's catches without any mitigation of remorse of voice? If there is no respect of time, place, nor persons in you? We did keep time, sir, in our catches. Snack up! Sir Toby, I must be round with you. My lady bade me tell you that though she harbours you as her kinsman, she's nothing allied to your disorders. If you can separate yourself and your misdemeanours, you are welcome to the house. If not, and it would please you to take leave of her, she is very willing to bid you farewell. Instead of directly responding to Malvolio, and that is a threat to throw Sir Toby out of the house, Sir Toby responds by ironically singing him a love song. Farewell, dear heart, then since I must needs be gone. Farewell, dear heart, since I must needs be gone. His eyes do show, his days are almost done. And of course this is a joke. And then finally Sir Toby says, what is wrong with you? Art any more than a steward? Dost think because thou art virtuous, there shall be no more cakes and ale? And Malvolio then appeals to Maria, saying, you have to choose. Choose between your mistress and these guys. If you carry on like this, it'll be the end for you too. And Maria is very angry. Maria seems to have a weak spot for Sir Toby. It's kind of hard to believe, since he seems to be this drunken, belching fool. But, there is nobody who is so bad that somebody might not be in love with them. And Maria doesn't like to see him threatened this way. She suggests that they, instead of allowing Sir Toby to just go and beat Malvolio's lights out, that what she'll do instead is make fun of him, is set up a practical joke. And that practical joke is going to depend upon Malvolio's weak spot. Malvolio's weak spot is that despite the fact that he's such an unpleasant, humorless person, he thinks everyone loves him. And so what she will do is write a letter that looks as though it comes from Olivia and drop it for Malvolio, and the letter will suggest that Olivia is secretly in love with Malvolio, and this will give him a chance to make himself look like an idiot. Sir Toby loves practical jokes. He thinks this is wonderful. So they're playing on his flaws, his desire to hurry love, and the fact that he has this major desire to force things to go his own way. When Orsino and Viola are talking next, it almost seems Viola almost confesses that she is in love with him. Orsino starts to ask, well, gee, are you in love with somebody? And she says, well, yes, a little, by your favor. What kind of woman is it? Of your complexion? She is not worth thee, then. Of what years, of faith? About your years, my lord? So something like, she looks a lot like you, and she kind of is about your age. And one of the things that's interesting is that in addition to asking these questions, Orsino is starting to show some interest in somebody other than himself, because despite the fact that he's claimed to be so much in love with Olivia, actually he's been a very self-centered person. And now he starts to ask questions about Viola's sister. Orsino insists that men are only capable of love, that women are not suited for major passion, and there couldn't possibly be a woman who loves him as much as he loves Olivia, and Viola loses it at that. And she insists that she knows that that's not true, and that she has a sister who fell in love with a man. As it might be perhaps, were I a woman, I should, your lordship. And what's her history? A blank, my lord. She never told her love, but let concealment, like a worm in the bud, feed on her damask cheek. She pined and thought, and with a green and yellow melancholy she sat, like patience on a monument, smiling at grief. Was not this love indeed? We men may say more, swear more, but indeed our shows are more than will. For still we prove much in our vows, but little in our love. But died thy sister of her love, my boy? I am all the daughters of my father's house, and all the brothers too, and yet I know not. Sir, shall I to this lady? Oh, that's the theme, yeah. It seems as though Orsino is displaying a certain curiosity about this supposed sister of Viola's. Again, that's unlike the way he's behaved, and that in a way he's almost betraying a certain attraction to this boy, which might be a matter of some concern for him. One of the questions is is he beginning to figure out, in fact, that this is not a boy at all, but a girl? Or is he beginning to fall in love with Viola? Sir Toby and Fabian, who is another guy who is not Festa, and Sir Andrew come to enjoy the spectacle of Malvolio picking up the letter. Maria has nailed this just right. When Malvolio comes in, he's already fantasizing about what it would be like if he were married to Olivia. He thinks that it would be swell, that there's a reasonable chance for it, and also the best part would be that he would get to kick Sir Toby around, that he would get to really lay the law down to him. Sir Toby keeps forgetting that he's supposed to be in hiding and almost responds to Malvolio directly a couple of times. Cousin Toby, my fortunes, having cast me on your niece, give me this prerogative of speech. What? What? You must amend your drunkenness. Out, scab! And they have to pull him back and force him not to actually attack Malvolio. And then Malvolio finds the letter. To the unknown beloved, this and my good wishes, her very phrases. By your leave, wax soft, and the impressure her lucrece with which she uses to seal. 'Tis my lady, to whom should this be? And then Maria has set up both verses and a letter. Jove knows I love, but who? Lips do not move, no man must know. No man must know. What follows? The number's altered. No man must know. If this should be thee, Malvolio, I may command where I adore, but silence like a Lucrece knife with bloodless stroke my heart doth gore. M-O-A-I doth sway my life. M-O-A-I doth sway my life. Yeah, but let me see. And so at first he thinks, okay, this works. You know, I may command where I adore. Well, this is, she is my lady. I serve her. That's fine. But then he thinks, if I could make that resemble something in me, he says. And so it's not a question of does he want to find out whether this resembles something in him. He wants to make this letter mean that Olivia loves him. Malvolio. Why, that begins my name! So he does figure it out. They were beginning to be worried that he wouldn't. And then he says, this simulation is not as the former, and yet to crush this a little, it would bow to me, for every one of these letters are in my name. Soft, here follows prose. If this fall into thy hand, revolve. In my stars I am above thee, but be not afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some of greatness thrust upon them. Thy fates open their hands, let thy blood and spirit embrace them, and to inure thyself to what thou art like to be, cast thy humble slough and appear fresh. Be opposite with a kinsman, surly with servants, let thy tongue tang arguments of state, put thyself into the trick of singularity. She thus advises thee that sighs for thee. Remember who commanded thy yellow stockings, and wished to see thee ever cross-gartered. I pray, remember. Go to, thou art made if thou desirest to be so. If not, let me see thee a steward still, the fellow of servants, and not worthy to touch fortune's fingers. Farewell, she that would alter services with thee, the fortunate unhappy. Yes! She loves me! And she is so clever because Maria has made Malvolio remember things that never happened. Remember how I praised your yellow stockings. Remember how I praised your cross-gartering. And tells him to please wear this. Now, yellow being a color that's very loud, and cross-gartering being this very old-fashioned fashion, and also something that's a little extreme, this is the equivalent of Olivia saying, oh, wow, I just love your lime green polyester leisure suit. And so what this means is that when Malvolio comes in, he's going to be wearing the Renaissance equivalent of a lime green polyester leisure suit just to make Olivia happy. And then he's also been enjoined to smile. Thou canst not choose, but know who I am. If thou entertainest my love, let it appear in thy smiling. Thy smiles become thee well, therefore in my presence still smile, dear my sweet, I prithee. Jove, I thank thee, I will smile. I will do everything that thou wilt have me. Now, of course, Malvolio hasn't smiled since the Hoover administration, and so he has to kind of creak it up so that he can actually smile. Mariah then points out that Olivia is particularly unfond of the color yellow and of cross-gartering, and that the smiling is going to be something that she's going to be convinced that Malvolio is out of his mind. This is usually the big moment that everybody waits for, is the entrance of Malvolio. And at this point, the moment when you're waiting for the entrance of Malvolio in his Renaissance lime green polyester leisure suit, this is usually where there's an intermission in the play, and it seems an appropriate intermission for our lecture. I'll see you next week.